Here's something that a lot of Washington insiders will say that absolutely is not true. They say, well, if we pass the FairTax bill, then we can have both a national sales tax and an income tax. That is false. Okay, the bill specifically does two things. It eliminates the income tax and it abolishes the IRS. Okay, it eliminates the income tax and abolishes the IRS, which is needed to collect it. So if a future Congress wanted to bring back the income tax, it would have to repeal the FairTax Act and then reinstitute an income tax system. Okay, if they repeal the FairTax Act, there is no national sales tax. So no, we could not have both, and that's just a red herring that they use because a lot of the people in these groups have friends who are tax lobbyists, or they want to make millions of dollars as a tax lobbyist, and they want that system to stay the way it is. If you saw Sean Hannity's special Boomtown over the weekend showing the largesse of Washington, D.C., it's those lobbyists that make our system what it is today. They benefit from small changes in the tax code. They want to keep it that way. That's why they have suits that are worth more than my car.
Not getting ahead of this, but talking about if we did not have to file a tax return, South Carolina fair tax, we wouldn't have had, if it was implemented the way we wanted it to be in the last few years, then we wouldn't have had to worry about identity theft, would we?
That's absolutely right. They wouldn't have a social security number on file.
Right.
So that's a very good point.
And I'm not trying to, but
I'm going to get to that later. But that's a good point. All right, so we're going to switch gears right now and talk about our state tax policy. Let me just outline our state tax system for you, and then I'll tell you how fair tax is a solution for that. We have three different funding categories in our state government. We've got what we call the general fund. So when the news media talks about the state budget, that's what they're talking about. And the general fund has three tax sources. It has a 7% personal income tax rate, it has a 5% corporate income tax rate, and it has a base 6% state sales tax. Now that you have local option sales taxes on top of that. But that's what we call a general fund. It recently went up to about $7 billion. We came up with about $1 billion in unexpected revenue last year. So what did they do? They just found a way to spend it all. And that's a whole different topic. But in any case, that's what we call our general fund. Then we've got what we call the other fund. And that's basically money that's collected from fines, fees, and college tuition. So if you have a son or daughter that goes to Carolina, you pay tuition to the University of South Carolina, it goes into the other fund, and then it goes back to the University of South Carolina. So while some people make a big deal of that, it's basically money that's accountable by the agency that collects it. So if you pay a hunting license, it goes to the Department of Natural Resources to fund their programs. So that's actually very accountable. And then you have the federal funding that goes to things like Medicaid and schools and highways. And that's for specific purposes, and it usually has strings attached. So the state will have to match the federal money. But in any case, we have little control over the federal funds except say, no, we don't want it, and we don't want your mandates to go with it. That's something I'd strongly recommend for education. Say, we're going to turn down your education funds, but we're going to play by our rules. So we actually have to spend more on unfunded mandates at the school district or the state level than we get in federal funds. But that's a whole different topic. I'll come back and talk about that sometime. But anyway, those are our three funding categories at the state level. Now, what a lot of people commingle with it, and it's unfortunate, is local property taxes, which go to school districts and your municipal government and your county government. And those are not state funds. Those are funds that are collected by local entities and get spent in the local area, whether it's the schools, the police department, the fire department, the EMS. That's your property tax bill, and that's not related to the state budget. A lot of people confuse that. They think that they're tied together. They are not. So the fair tax has no impact on the property tax. I'll explain how it could a little bit later. But just if people get confused about that, tell them the fair tax plan only deals with the general fund budget that I outlined earlier. All right, so that with those three taxes that we mentioned that funds the general fund, 7% personal income tax, the 5% corporate income tax, and 6% sales tax. Can anybody in this room, except Wilma, tell me what our House leadership plan is for tax reform this year? Anybody tell me what their plan is? All right, well, they've done a really good job of communicating that. Active people like you that didn't know it. Their plan, and the governor talked about it in your State of the State, is to take out a couple income tax brackets. That sounds real good. We're just removing some income tax brackets and we're going to flatten our tax code. Well, here's where it's not such a big deal, is that at $13,400 in income, we all pay the top 7% income tax rate. So if we remove the 6% bracket, that's not going to affect our take-home pay because we're paying the 7% rate. Very few people know that. In North Carolina, you have to make about $65,000 before you pay the top rate. In South Carolina, it's $13,400. So when they say our plan is to remove those tax brackets, it's not affecting the bottom line.
That's not exactly it, that they're only going to remove the bottom tax bracket. They're also consolidating the top tax bracket from 7% down to 5%.
Haven't seen that in the legislation.
Yeah.
You tell me what the bill is. And
I mean, there is. I mean, it's just not just removing the 6% up to 7%.
Like I said, give me a bill number that reduces that 7%, and I'll tell people that. But the bill that I've seen doesn't do that. It just removes those lower tax brackets. So in any case, if people don't take home more pay, the economy doesn't grow. So with the fair tax plan, we remove the 7% personal income tax, the 5% corporate income tax, and we take the exemptions out of the sales tax code. In 2010, we had a commission that looked at our entire tax system. It was called the Tax Realignment Committee, or TRAC. And they did a study showing that our sales tax code exempted more revenue than it collected. It exempted $2.7 billion and only collected $2.5 billion. So by taking those myriad exemptions out of the sales tax code and applying that 6% rate across that broader base, we replace the revenue from the income tax. So that's a painless way where we can eliminate the income tax, have a broad-based sales tax code. People take home, in the case of my wife and me, hundreds of dollars more each month, and that allows us to pour money into the economy. That helps restaurants like Lizard's Thicket. It helps car dealers, it helps realtors, it helps landscapers, and it helps tax accountants. Everybody that in the service industry benefits when we take home more pay. So that's a very powerful tool. There are now 9 states that do not have a personal income tax. Florida and Texas are the ones you hear about the most because they lead the country in job creation. A lot of wealth is leaving states like California, New York, and Ohio and going to Texas and Florida and Tennessee. So we want to be one of those wealth creation states where people like Phil Mickelson say, hey, I'm tired of California's high taxes. I'm going to go live on Kiowa or Seabrook, play on a great golf course, and not pay state income tax. Rush Limbaugh went from New York to Florida. Glenn Beck took his operation from New York to Texas. So there's a huge out-migration of job creators, of wealthy entrepreneurs and retirees who are relocating to the zero income tax states. We benefit strongly by being one of those.